more that you read, the more things you'll know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to read. Reading has the power to open our eyes, open our hearts, and truly transform us. Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Muslim Bookshelf, Islam Channel's first ever book show. Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Muslim Bookshelf. I am your host, Naima B. Robert, an avid reader just like you are, I'm sure, Insha'Allah. Now, I've got a rather fun quote to share with you today, and that is from the world-famous, legendary children's author, Dr. Seuss. Yes, the Cat in the Hat Man. And he said, "The more that you read, the more things you'll know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go." And this is true for children just as it is for adults. And that's why I want us Muslims to actively encourage our children to be readers, to reap the spiritual, intellectual, mental, emotional, and socio-cultural rewards of reading widely, wisely, and well. And that's why I've made a commitment for the Muslim Bookshelf to feature not just adult books, but books for children as well. And if you have a little person in your life who likes children's books, who likes books, then today's guest is going to knock your socks off, because today, alhamdulillah, I'm really pleased to be sitting down with Hafsah Dabiri, author of several titles, including My Dad Is Always Working.
Hafsah Dabiri is ever-changing, alhamdulillah. I first started off obviously in school, and I published my first children's book while I was actually in secondary school, going into sixth form. And so alhamdulillah, that kind of led me towards the literature side of things. But I've also sort of been involved in politics, I've been involved in marketing, and still am involved in marketing. And I just have many passions, I think, alhamdulillah, even basketball. So I actually played basketball and netball while I was in school, and I almost got to play netball professionally as well, but then I found out that I had a disability that would stop me from playing, and instead I decided to sort of write a book about playing sport, to sort of transform that journey for myself and make it a bit more positive. And so for anyone who's read Basirah, you'll kind of see the lines along which I was sort of writing, that you can have a dream and it can not come true for you, but you can sort of transform that journey to better yourself as an individual, and for the long term, Insha'Allah. I became an author overnight, actually. I had sat down and I'd been writing for a while, journaling, sort of writing my thoughts down. And I said to myself, you know what, I like the end product of working on a creative project. And I was like, you know what, a children's book seems like it's within my grasp, something that I can sit down in one night, write, and sort of have a finished product in front of me. And so I took all of these thoughts that I had in my journal, and just in terms of my journey in life in general, and I sat down one evening and I wrote Basirah the Basketballer in about 3 hours, actually. And then the next morning I gave it to my mum, who's a teacher, and she did all the corrections and the grammatical stuff. And she said, send it off, and I sent it off to a publisher, and alhamdulillah, it's taken off since then. An interesting fact about me is I love to write my family members into books. And so a lot of the names in the books are actually my siblings' names, my mum's names, my dad's names, my cousins' names, my in-laws' names. And I love being able to kind of bring the book out, and they ask me to read it, and they can kind of sort of see themselves as characters within the book. And that's why, for me, the representation of having diverse characters who look like me and look like my siblings and my cousins sort of is really, really important. And I think I've seen that in the joy that it brings to myself, my community, and those who have read the book, alhamdulillah. My current hobby actually is marketing and finding halal ways to bring products, books, services into Muslim homes. And so I love taking clients who have these huge, amazing ideas but need the help in being able to get their message across to their audiences, and that's a form of storytelling in and of itself. And so I really do love taking an idea and seeing the product and seeing the service being used in the way that it was created for. The thing that drives me the most as an author is being able to hear from parents and children that the book has resonated with them and the books have resonated with them. With My Dad Is Always Working specifically, when I published that, it was an ode to my dad, and it was an ode to my mum and my parents and the kind of childhood that I had. And I felt like there wasn't really a lot of books that reflected that. There's a lot of books about mums and how amazing and hardworking mums are. And it kind of neglects the role of fathers in the household, even if they might not be physically present, the other ways in which they are present for their families. And so for me, being able to hear from mums who really appreciate being able to sort of pass on that gratitude to their husbands and sort of share that lesson with their children as well, that's been really, really heartwarming. And I think that's what motivates me to continue writing, to think about what are the stories that are going untold, what are the stories and the people who are going unappreciated, and how can we lift the light up to those shadows and to those stories that deserve to be heard, Insha'Allah. I get my inspiration from the world around me. I get inspiration from the stories that I hear from my parents, from my siblings, and I think a lot of it is through introspection. I do a lot of I take every moment, I think, and think about what the value of that moment might be and how that can translate into something that is bigger than just that singular thought. Because a lot of the time I think writing has to come from within. And so yeah, if you're a writer and you're looking for inspiration, I think definitely take a moment to yourself, sit down and really reflect on what's important to you, what are the things that you're struggling with, and how you can translate that into a story that can help you work through that moment in your life. What's next for me as an author, I think, is more writing. I definitely I'm working on some chapter books at the moment that are really exciting. And I want to write my son into more books, so I'm hopefully going to make a series about him. I hope he enjoys them. And yeah, just more writing, Insha'Allah, taking my writing a lot more seriously, because I think as authors we do have times where we forget the power of our work and the power of our writing, and so I'm trying to remind myself that I not only write for myself and my children, but I write for others as well, and so I should take that really seriously. My biggest achievement, I think, as an author has been that area of sort of uncovering stories that haven't been told before, and I want to be able to continue to do that. I remember when I got a review about My Dad Is Always Working, and someone was talking about how the story didn't deserve to be told because it was too niche and it was too conservative, and I really just thought to myself, like, that is really not how the world of books works. Every story does deserve to be told, and the fact that I had so many other reviews from parents that their husbands would cry over the book, and their children would sort of create cards for their dads to thank their dads after a day of work, etc. Just proved to me that I have to kind of continue championing those stories and creating those stories, Insha'Allah. Anybody can be a writer. If you have a story, tell it. And do it with the best of intentions, and Allah will allow those books and those words to have an impact, Insha'Allah.
Hafsah, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
So we've got some beautiful books on the table. I know that you've been in this space for a while, but before we dive into the books, tell us, how do you introduce yourself these days?
That is very interesting. I think I'll start off with Mama at first, because that takes up a lot of my time, and sleep. And what else would I say? I would say I'm a writer, alhamdulillah. And I'm passionate about writing books that feature characters that you don't necessarily see within Islamic books or within within literature generally. And then also I would say that I'm really, really passionate about introducing topics that aren't necessarily discussed within children's books and highlighting them in a positive way, especially when it comes to Islamic values and things that might be portrayed slightly differently within Western culture. And so, yeah, I love writing.
Yeah, so she is is a writer and has been working within writer spaces,
Yeah.
etc., for a while now. But you're a bit of an anomaly because you wrote your first children's book before you were a mum,
Yes.
before you were married.
Yes.
What was the book?
Yeah.
And why was the book?
Yes, so I wrote a book called Basirah the Basketballer, and it features a character who I would say looks like me. And it was a book that came out of a want to kind of just see myself. And now I can say that I write for my children, but I definitely wrote for myself at a young age. And I'd been writing so many things, journaling, and I just thought a children's book is the easiest form for me to complete very quickly because I was working on longer forms, novels, and kind of things that reflected the day-to-day trials that I was going through, how I was dealing with them, the advice that I'd get from my mother and from my dad as well. And so I decided to sort of condense it into a children's book, and that's where Basirah was born. And during that time, while I was in secondary school, I was going through a lot of things in terms of, I was really sporty, and then I found out that I had this disability that meant that I would have to stop playing forever. Haven't played netball, basketball since then, alhamdulillah, but I became a writer out of it because I decided to take that trial, that test of tawakkul truly that you have at a young age that you don't necessarily see as this sort of watershed moment for you, but can always be, a spark for you when you kind of go through things when you're quite young. And I wanted to be able to kind of communicate that transition, that growth in iman, that growth in self-belief in yourself, that you're not limited to being one thing, you're not limited to just being a writer, you can be anything that you want to be, as long as you have trust that Allah's plan is the best plan for you, and you say Insha'Allah. Like
Basirah, the basketballer.
Yes.
Now, so Basirah the basketballer says Insha'Allah.
Yes.
What is it about?
Yep.
What is it about?
So Basirah, she goes through, she wants to be the basketball captain, and she decides that if she says Insha'Allah, things are going to happen for her. And so she goes through the book, goes through her day, doing different things, saying Insha'Allah and getting those things. So she does an exam, she passes her exam after she says Insha'Allah. She's in the cafeteria wanting to get some dessert. She says, Insha'Allah, she gets the final dessert that's left, and she says, yes, Allah is definitely with me, and He wants for me to have the things that I want.
Interesting.
And so when she's now doing the trials to become the basketball captain, she doesn't get it, and her best friend gets it instead. And she's really, really upset because she's like, Dad, you told me that if I say Insha'Allah before I do anything, it will happen for me. And her dad breaks down to her that, let me even share the page with you.
Let's hear what the dad says about that.
And this is something that I've learnt from my parents myself, and so that's why it was written into the book. And so Basirah's obviously upset after she doesn't become the captain, and her dad wipes her tear-stained cheek with his thumb, and he says, Insha'Allah isn't a magic word that makes your wishes automatically come true, but it's a word that reminds us to work as hard as we can, then trust in Allah to give us whatever is best for us. And that is something that you can carry through life, and something that I feel can really help a young child be able to navigate the world in a better way, and in a more Islamic way, because I feel like a lot of the time we're very entitled as humans, and we don't know that, when we don't get things, it doesn't mean that, Allah doesn't love us. It doesn't mean that we're not worthy of, becoming successful or going on to get that thing in the future. It just means we have to work hard. And that's what Allah wants from us, to continually be striving to be better and towards that excellence.
So it sounds to me like there's a lesson here for the little kid who's having the story read, but also for us.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
As the adults who are reading the book, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
At what stage in your life did you write this book?
Yeah, so I wrote it when I was in secondary school, and it was published just as I entered university.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah,
okay, so there's two things that I've learned about Sister Hafsah that I did not know. Okay, today I'm learning these two things. How does a secondary school girl get the confidence to write a story and actually move forward to getting it published? Talk us through that journey.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one thing to write, and it's another thing to have confidence in your reason why.
Yeah.
And for me, I felt as if the story was so important to me, and it would be so important to the people around me and my community. You might not be confident in your writing, but the writing can always be developed. And you can always get an editor. You can always, the way I did it was I gave it to my mum, and she works with students all the time, and she looks after kids. So she knows about it from like the children's book perspective. And she took it from me. She corrected the grammatical errors. She kind of worked with me to make it more realistic and more relatable. That was, you know, just a couple of days of conversation with her, and then I just sent it off to the publisher.
Wow.
And I would always say to anyone who wants to write, don't limit yourself, don't limit Allah. Send out whatever you're going to send out, and let what's going to happen, because even if it comes back with critique, that critique is beneficial for you, and it might mean that, you know, you develop the work even more, and then you send it off again. And publishers are not going to look at you and be like, you know, you've already sent in 3 pieces of work, they're not going to open another one. Rather, if they're seeing your name come up a lot, they'll see your work develop, and they'll want to work with you eventually. So never let, you know, close the door of opportunity for yourself before you've had a chance to even go through it.
I love that. I love that. And I like what you said about your why. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that that is something I talk about a lot. And we hear a lot of us within the writing space talking about the why and the importance of the why. Sorry to use the word why again, but why is the why so important?
The why is important because it's what drives a person. I've had so many moments where I'm just like, I need to do a master's in writing and just get all the information and develop my skill because I'm just not good enough. I've had moments where I've read reviews and they've, you know, just ripped apart my piece of work, and I've just felt as if, you know, I'm never going to be a good writer. And then I always sit back and remind myself of the people who have messaged and said, you know, my daughter read your book and she was like, that dad looks like my dad and that character looks like me. And, you know, they dress up as Basirah for World Book Day and they feel like, you know, they don't even have to, you know, change that much of themselves because they already look like Basirah. They just wear a jersey, a hijab, and they feel represented. And so that's what drives you to continually wake up every single day and say that you're going to work on that piece of work. And those, you know, those thoughts and those overthinking thoughts that in your mind that tell you that you can't, that's what combats that, inshallah, you know, with the help of Allah, with dua, but with your why as well, firmly kind of rooted, you reminding yourself of that why on a daily basis. What is the outcome that you want? What do you want children to kind of feel as they read your book? How do you want their lives to be changed by reading your book?
And that's intentionality, isn't it?
100%, 100%. And that's what the religion is based on. You have your intention before the action. And so you continually remind yourself of that intention. So then you perfect that action and continuously do it regularly, inshallah.
A small secret. This book, My Dad Is Always Working, is in another Islam Channel show. There's a beautiful reading of it in the story time on Islam Channel Kids. And when the story was being read, the behind-the-scenes crew were enthralled because of the subject matter of the book. What is this book about?
So My Dad Is Always Working is loosely based off of my life as well, based off of sort of the relationship that I had with my family growing up and the family dynamic. And so within the book, the character Abdullah, he kind of sees his dad going out to work every single day, and he's getting upset at the fact that his dad isn't physically with him.
And it's the weekend, isn't it? The story happens in the weekend, so he's not impressed.
Yeah, exactly. And we wanted to kind of take the book to the extreme because, I think a lot of children, especially, not even children, adults and parents now, they can recall their parents going away to different countries for work. And that's not even, you know, the extent to which it's happening now. I think a lot more parents are able to kind of work around their families. But sometimes you do have parents who have to leave the country, who have to travel up and down, who have to commute, who have to work weekends. And so this is just kind of a representation of any sort of parent who isn't physically able to be there when the children expect them to be there. And we wanted to present love in another form.
Because I mean, I really, of course, you're going to buy the book and read it, everyone. But so we won't try to give away too many spoilers. But he has a shift, doesn't he? Because he's upset. Okay, we know kids do get upset. He just says, my dad's always working. And then there's a conversation at school, isn't there, about gratitude and, you know, being grateful to someone. Who does he think of first?
Thinks of his mum. And which I think is easy to relate to, especially in sort of typical Muslim family dynamics. It's easy to relate to that. And so he thinks of his mum straight away. And on that point, I want to mention that this book doesn't, you know, say that, you know, parents can't, you know, their roles can't be intertwined and sort of, you know, be in a different format. But it just means that children are able to kind of use their imagination to imagine who they would immediately be grateful towards, and then think about if they can be grateful to the other parent in a different way as well.
I like the way that the mum the mum is a very pivotal part of the story, and definitely helps him to have his aha moment, which is very, very sweet. But it celebrates dads. Now, was that a conscious decision within a context, or was it just a story that came to you?
Yeah, it was definitely a conscious decision. I think from the perspective of how men and fathers are portrayed, I don't think there's enough gratitude that goes towards the role that they play. And there's a lot of things to do with mental health, physical health, that we don't appreciate when it comes to men going out to work. And it actually is quite burdensome. You know, even you just think about, you know, if a father has, you know, a sort of accident or he becomes really unwell, he's thinking about how he's going to put food on the table ultimately. And, you know, there's a lot of gratitude that we have to have towards our fathers playing that role, and then also being present in the house in a way that you might actually not realise.
Because this dad is doing the most in the story, mashallah, he does a lot.
You know, it's much like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, you know, he would go out and fulfill his responsibility, and he would come back into the home and be present and help out in different ways as well. And, you know, when he goes to war, obviously, you know, the children, the wives, everything, they won't see him. But it doesn't mean that he wasn't the father, that the best of fathers. And so I wanted to sort of replicate that within the book, that, you know, there's a lot of value that's placed on being physically there for your children. And I feel like there's a lot of, even in the reviews, there was a lot of criticism coming from outside the Muslim community that was saying that why are we sort of presenting fathers as people who don't need to be present, and why are we kind of minimizing, you know, the role that they should be playing, and really kind of saying that, you know, the child was
this is perpetuating gender stereotypes and
definitely.
Oppressive gender norms.
Yes.
I'm assuming. Okay.
Yes.
So that tells you everything that you need to know about those reviewers, and very little about the book itself.
Most definitely, because even with me, obviously my dad was working in different countries, but my mum was working. And she very much still works at the moment. She works full time. And me writing this book, she didn't sit there and think, oh, so is there no gratitude that goes towards mothers? She actually cried as well and wanted to read it to my dad quite regularly, because she understands the role that they play and the fact that gratitude isn't given enough towards them.
I think that this is definitely something we're talking more about in the community now, and I think it gives us a real opportunity to kind of pull that gratitude back into the home. You know, we know that everybody has their role to play within a household, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values all the roles. It's just as human beings, sometimes we can fail to actually express that gratitude, or fail to appreciate. And if you're appreciated, whatever role you're playing in the home, you want to do more of it, right?
100%.
Have you experienced that?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I think it's just human nature, and you know, when your value is given value, and when you can see that the role that you're playing is actually bringing happiness to people, bringing joy to people, bringing joy to your home, it's definitely something that you want to continue to do. And I think that even when I, you know, feel like I'm slacking in my responsibility, nobody needs to tell me. I feel that that sort of that drive to want to do more myself, and ultimately we have to remember that it's all for the sake of Allah. It's not for men, it's not for women, it's not for your children. Ultimately, it's because we want to enter Jannah, and so may Allah make it easy for us to all kind of fulfill what we need to fulfill.
Ameen. So what I want the viewers to know is that many children's books look beautiful and sound very beautiful, have wonderful, you know, descriptions and, you know, dialogue and situations. They can be funny, they can be touching, they can be moving, but ultimately there is a deeper meaning, almost always. Would you agree with that?
Most definitely.
There's always an underlying why there. I find it very hard to believe that even in comical children's books, or even in ridiculous ones, I can always see that the author's got a message that they're trying to put through, whatever the message is. And I love the fact that within the Muslim community, our messages are from Islam. You know, so it could be a story about basketball, it could be a story about a dad who's really busy, but essentially that underpinning of the deen is always going to be there, subhanAllah.
Definitely. And I think with children's books, it's very easy to draw on those values from yourself and kind of read them into the book. And so when you are reading to your children, especially when I'm reading to my son, I'm very much kind of looking for any opportunity to kind of allow it to dig deeper.
To reinforce
for him.
something.
Yeah, definitely.
So you became a mum not too long ago, mashallah, mabruk, congratulations.
Jazakallah
May Allah
khair.
bless your family.
I mean,
You had a baby.
yes.
And then you had another book baby.
Yes, I
Talk to us about the book baby.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So when I was pregnant, I was very bored. Very, very bored. So I was just thinking of ways in which I could prepare for what was about to happen. And during that time, I was just thinking about the kind of resources that were out there for young children in terms of just their development, you know, Islamically and non-Islamically as well. And I felt like from the newborn stage, there wasn't really much that was centered around sort of Islamic practice or Quran or anything for newborns, which is obviously understandable because it's a very it's a very early stage of development in their life. And I was kind of looking at these sensory cards to use during tummy time that you kind of put on the floor.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, the drawings were all very great. And I was thinking, okay, how could I move this more towards kind of introducing him to Islam and introducing him to the Quran and the language of the Quran from an early age. And I think it's very important that, you know, the first couple of years of development, you can teach your children so much Quran and there's so much opportunity within that space. So I was like, okay, first couple of months of him in this world, how can I ensure that he's learning as much as possible? And so I developed these cards that allowed me to so I sort of designed these cards that have sensory patterns on them, so high contrast patterns, but also include the Arabic alphabet within them as well.
Nice.
And so when they're within tummy time, which, you know, they spend hours and hours, you know, over the months within that position on the floor, what is he going to be looking at, and what is going to be something that can aid in his learning of the Arabic language. And so I designed his first sensory Arabic book, and we printed a copy that had his name on it, and you know, said printed by Daddy, designed by Mummy at the bottom.
Mashallah.
And I shared it on my Instagram, and there were so many sisters who were expecting that were like, Hafsah, give this to us now.
Yes.
And so made it available on Amazon. And Insha'Allah, we hope to make it sort of a flashcard deck as well, with a lot more kind of activities and things that they can use as they get older, so it kind of grows with them, Insha'Allah.
Absolutely, yeah. May Allah make that successful. I mean, that's super cool. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And it is wonderful to see the toddler segment growing for Muslim and Islamic materials. I think over the past few years we've started to see a lot more investment in that area, because I think toddler books are more expensive sometimes to produce, because they need to have that sensory element. They're thicker usually, they're board books or they're cloth books, etc. So I'm curious to hear from you, because you know, I am of a certain age. I've been around the block a few times in this book space. So for you, as somebody who obviously you started very young, so that's something to be taken into account. But as I would see you as the next generation, or like a newer generation of author, of writer, of content creator, of somebody who's helping other authors. What do you see as the biggest opportunities right now for Muslim authors, and what are the biggest challenges?
I would say that the biggest opportunity is your first story, because I think your first story is so powerful, and it's most of the time something that someone hasn't done before. I think coming up with a second, third, fourth idea can be quite difficult, but that initial story that is often rooted in our experiences, often rooted in something that, you know, something really cathartic or dramatic that's happened to us.
Something from deep within.
Something from deep, definitely, something deep from deep within, and nobody has your experiences, nobody has your narrative, nobody has your voice. And so I think that first book is the biggest opportunity you'll probably ever have. And most people don't actually overcome that obstacle and don't, you know, go through that opportunity to then write their next book. So anybody who's thinking of writing, you already know the idea that I'm talking about. Write it first. Write it first, and then contact Naima. That's what I would say to you. That's your biggest opportunity. And then in terms of the biggest challenge, I would say it's everything after the writing process. Because the writing process, it's about building that self-belief.
It's internal, isn't it? A lot of internal work. And then
and internal can be guided. You can be kind of mentored. You can find a community that allows you to kind of write consistently, that reviews your work and all of that kind of stuff. And you can you know, do very practical things that are within your control.
Yep.
And then I would say the next step after that is actually getting your book into homes. And that's what I do.
That's the external, and tell us about what you do.
Yes, so alhamdulillah, I part-time work within marketing, and very much focused on sort of small Muslim businesses, small to medium-sized Muslim businesses, but also Muslim authors is very much a space that I'm very passionate about, just because I have a lot of them around me, and I've helped quite a few sisters sort of bring their books into the world, and into homes. I think that's the specific thing. Directly into homes where you want it, and so, you know, I think there's so much in the world of sort of marketing, SEO, after you've been published, getting it into stores.
The techie marketing sales stuff that all the authors hate, by the way. Nobody wants to talk about that. But you
have to sell it.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of feels a bit distasteful sometimes, because you're like, I've written this with a very kind of sincere purpose and intention. But if you don't, so even when it comes to just like posting something online, if you don't have the right keywords, the right people aren't going to see it. And so if you want to have that impact, you have to allow the book to get to the people that need it, essentially. And so selling shouldn't sound like something that's sort of like malicious and sort
underhanded somehow, or manipulative. We have a lot of stories. We have a lot of stories about selling books and just selling in general. I think you know, I think we have a lot of stories that so many people, they tell themselves a story that's not what I came here for. You know, like you said, I have a pure intention, and that will muddy the intention somehow, or like, that's just not my thing. I don't do that kind of thing. And then also there's like a resentment as well. It's like, well, why should I have to do this? Like, I wrote the book, didn't I?
Yeah,
you know?
100%,
but
100%.
So how do you help? I would, you know, if in case anyone's watching and feels that way, what advice would you give them for how to reframe those thoughts?
I would say definitely going back to your why. Because if you're very sincere about your why, you'll do anything for those people to get the book that they need.
Thank you.
And I think even with Basirah, when it came out, I was so driven by the why that drive just allowed Basirah to literally fly off my hands.
MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah. We were in schools, we were in Finland, we were in...
Wow.
we were at Cheltenham Literature Festival.
Amazing.
And I was in a room filled with people who looked the complete opposite to me, talking about Basirah.
Wow,
and
how cool is that?
SubhanAllah, I remember coming out of that room just thinking, that was the best experience I could have had in terms of communicating Islamic values in a way that they could understand and benefit from. And that just shows the reach of, you know, what it means to have belief in something that's bigger than you, and to try and not give up. And so I would say to anybody that if your why is really your why, marketing is very, very important. And, you know, what we do is very much ensuring that, you know, there is a side to marketing that is very much not permissible and very much kind of does muddy things. But there is a whole other side of marketing that is very permissible, and there are ways in which you can have faceless marketing. There's ways in which you can, you know, develop things in a way that doesn't mean that you're spending too much money. That means
or too much time on social media, because that's another thing that a lot of people feel icky about. They feel, well, if I have to do some marketing for my book, that means I have to market myself, which means I have to be on social media, because I have to be spending loads of time on social media, and those are all barriers, because in general people don't want to do that.
And marketing doesn't have to be digital. No. You could never go onto social media or have a page for your website or have a page for your book rather, and still be marketing, because there's very much a community aspect to marketing of going into schools, communicating with teachers, going into homeschooling communities, going into masjids and Islamic centres and taking your book into there,
leveraging
and doing
those
sessions,
mashallah.
Definitely. And so marketing comes in the form that's comfortable for you, and there's always space for you to kind of be who you are within that space.
I love that, and I hope that really helps somebody who's watching this, you know, who has been having those thoughts. Jazakallah khairan for sharing that. Okay, so kind of final thoughts on how can we as Muslims resist the pull of distractions, of social media, of the cutting of our train of thought, of our concentration, etc. How can we, if possible, go back to reading?
I think that's a daily battle that I have as well, and I would say that the main things that I have around me is having a purpose for your social media and trying to stick to it as much as possible, and being very sort of your worst critic about how you use social media. But then also having people around you who check you as well is very important. Not only
I saw you online at 2 a.m.
What were you doing?
Exactly.
That is very important, yeah. And just, you know, because I feel like that's literally the time where everybody is scrolling just before Fajr, and then suddenly Fajr's come in and you're in your deepest part of your sleep. And so definitely checking yourself. And, you know, if you did miss Fajr that morning because you were scrolling, making that connection and adjusting yourself is very important. And, you know, even in terms of my family, we're very open with each other about when we do see each other using social media too much. And, you know, when you are making posts and stuff, I feel like sometimes we get lost in seeing what people are posting and not being too critical of it. And so we watch so much of it that we end up doing the same thing as well. Yeah. And so having someone who checks your posts, who's kind of like just someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, that ensures that everything that you're doing is actually permissible in the online space. And remembering that it is actually online as well, I think is very important.
It's
because
public.
It's very public.
Very, very public.
And you can't get rid of whatever you put on there.
That's true. That's
and
your
so
digital footprint right there.
Most definitely. And so, you know, if you knew that, for example, the doors to your house were wide open to the world.
Oh, you mean like in a walkthrough?
Yeah, like people walking past, literally, and people could just walk in and pass and everything. Yeah. You'd eat differently, you dress differently, you do a lot of things differently. And so in the online space as well, things do have to be done differently because it is a public space. And that's not to say that you can't be online, but it's just about how you manage that. And I think always doing research as well as to kind of just what Islam is saying about certain things.
Which I'm sorry if you don't mind me, like, you know, just pulling you on that one, is that we do tend to forget, I think, because we're so Muslim.
Yes.
We're with Muslims all the time. We work in Muslim spaces. We do all these Muslim-y things. But I do think that there is more and more, like, almost a failure to kind of, like, hold ourselves back and say, hold on, is this actually permissible? I mean, Muslims are doing it, but is this something that is beloved to Allah? Is it permissible even? You know, am I actually going to be sinful for this? It's definitely not part of the discourse. 100%. Maybe as much as it used to be, but certainly I think,
definitely now. And I think also the end doesn't justify the means. Just because what you're saying is going to have impact doesn't mean that you don't need to question the manner in which you're doing that. And so definitely in terms of social media, it's very important to kind of take the step of having those around you that check you, checking yourself constantly, and then just checking with, you know, people of knowledge and, you know, the books and everything, doing your own research and reading. And then in terms of finding time to read, I would definitely say get yourself, you know, a device or something that means that you can always be finding new books.
That's a good idea.
Because I think I don't have enough time to go to bookshops and buy all of the books in the world. And sometimes I'm like, I don't have this new book that's like making me excited about reading, that I've like read the first page and I'm like, I need to finish this in the next 24 hours. So, you know, get yourself a Kindle or whatever. And that also helps you to save the planet a bit in terms of printing. And so, just be able to kind of, get books and redevelop that love of reading through exploring what actually excites you.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I love that. And I want to just say my two pence worth before we wrap up. Give your children books, not phones. Give your children books, not screens of any kind if you can avoid it, because it does make a difference. Definitely. For as long as possible, I think parents should hold out. Anyway, that's my little 2 cents. Sis, how can people find you? And what are you working on now really quickly, and then how can people find you?
So we're actually launching the Kickstarter for this project soon, Insha'Allah, and we'll see how that's going to work, but we really want to get that into homes as soon as possible, Insha'Allah. And we have a couple more books coming out with Cube, Insha'Allah, a nice series that I'm very, very excited about. And you can find me on Instagram at Hafsah Dabiri, and that's my main platform at the moment, so that's the best place.
Excellent. I love it. I love it for you, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put all the barakah in it for you. Ameen. I can't wait to see the impact that these books will have, inshallah. And as usual, we hope that they end up on Muslim bookshelves all over the world. Ya Rab, make it happen. Jazakallah khairan, sis.
Jazakallah khair for having me. Alhamdulillah.
For more inspiring books, check out our weekly reading list. Heaven is at Mama's Feet by Shifa Saltagi Safadi. Trouble at the Rawi by Rosalind Noor. Speak Up Sami by Shabana Hussain. Tune in to join our weekly competition. Just answer the question below and you can win our award-winning book collection. What sport did the character Basirah play? A. Football. B. Basketball. C. Golf. D. Cricket. To enter, email tmbs@islamchannel.tv. Terms and conditions apply.